The coffee was still hot when I reread the invitation. A creamy paper with golden letters printed in perfect calligraphy. Promotion celebration, Olivia Bennett, new marketing director at Preston and Associates. At the bottom, handwritten in my sister's unmistakable handwriting. Come, Amanda. It's time to reconnect. Family is family. Family. A word that had lost meaning for me years ago. At 45, I rarely thought about my parents or Olivia, 5 years younger than me. Our paths had separated when I left home at 18, determined to build my own life away from constant comparisons and unequal expectations. While Olivia was the golden child, beautiful, sociable, the favorite, I was the pragmatic one, the too serious one, the one who needed to smile more. My parents never hid their preference. For each of Olivia's recitals, entire rows were reserved. For my academic awards, there was always an excuse, an important commitment, an unavoidable social event. Family is family, I repeated to myself, an empty mantra that no longer found an echo in my heart. I drank the last sip of coffee and looked out the window of my office. From the 37th floor, Boston looked like a meticulously organized board game. My board game, Bennett Innovations, a company I founded from scratch, was now worth over $300 million. 15 years of relentless work, sleepless nights, tough decisions. 15 years building something that was just mine, without my family knowing or caring. In the early years, I tried to share my achievements. Phone calls where I mentioned a new contract or an award were quickly redirected to Olivia's latest accomplishments. Invitations to family dinners always coincided with my business trips, and when I couldn't attend, the accusations came. Always prioritizing work. You don't care about family. Eventually, I stopped trying. Contact was reduced to Christmas cards and obligatory birthday messages, until, after almost 2 years without contact, that golden invitation arrived. James, my executive assistant, and perhaps the person who knew me best, watched me from his desk. "Your sister's invitation," he commented, not a question. "Do you think I should go?" I asked, although I knew the answer. The question, Amanda, is, do you want to go? I didn't. But something inside me, that part that still sought approval, that still hoped to hear, "We're proud of you," made me call Olivia. The conversation was brief and cordial, almost formal. She seemed genuinely surprised that I had called. "You're really coming? Wonderful." Her voice sounded excited. "Mom and Dad will be so happy. They always ask about you." A transparent lie. So transparent that I decided not to challenge it. "Yes, I'll be there. And congratulations on the promotion." "Thank you, sis. You know, not all of us are lucky enough to find our way as easily as you did. Some of us really have to struggle." I took a deep breath. Always the veiled comparisons, always the narrative that my life had been easy, as if my success had fallen from the sky. "I'm happy for you, Olivia," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "See you Saturday." As I hung up, I noticed James watching me with that look that said he knew exactly what was happening. "Family is complicated," he offered. "Family should be a refuge, not a battlefield," I replied. "Want me to rearrange your Monday schedule? If the event is disastrous, you might need time to recover." I smiled, grateful for his foresight. "That won't be necessary. I'm great at compartmentalizing." But I wasn't. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened that Saturday night. The event was being held in the ballroom of the Beacon Hotel, an elegant but not excessively luxurious place. I arrived promptly at 8, wearing a simple yet high-end black dress, hair pulled back in a low, discreet bun, minimalist makeup. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that would draw unnecessary attention. When I entered, I immediately located my family. My parents were at a table near the stage. Olivia circulated among the guests, radiant in a red dress, her fiancé, a man I had never met, by her side. I took a deep breath and advanced, feeling again like the awkward teenager in a world where I never seemed to fit in. My mother saw me first. For a moment, her face registered genuine surprise, as if she couldn't believe I had actually shown up. "Amanda, you came!" She stood up for a quick, awkward hug. "Richard, look who's here." My father turned around, that polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Amanda, it's been a while." There was no warmth, no genuine curiosity about my life. Just that superficial cordiality you offer to a distant acquaintance. "Honey, you look fine," my mother commented, her tone suggesting that fine wasn't exactly a compliment. Her eyes quickly examined my dress, my shoes, my hair. "I thought you were still working at that consulting firm." "I changed careers a few years ago," I replied vaguely. There was no point in correcting her. They never really paid attention when I talked about my work. "Oh, that's good. Olivia is so fulfilled now. Marketing director. And at just 40 years old, she's always been so determined." I smiled politely, ignoring the twinge of irritation. "Where can I find her?" "Over there with her fiancé. Did you know they're getting married in 3 months? A dream wedding, everything is already planned. She's always dreamed of a perfect wedding." I headed in the indicated direction, noticing how my parents hadn't asked a single question about my life. Not even the basics: where I lived, if I was in a relationship, how my health was. Nothing. Olivia smiled when she saw me, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The same smile as our father. "Amanda, you really came." She hugged me, the smell of expensive perfume enveloping me. "Let me introduce my fiancé. Nathan, this is my older sister, Amanda." Nathan extended his hand, his grip firm, his eyes quickly appraising me. Finally meeting the mysterious sister. "Olivia hardly talks about you." There was no malice in his words, just a statement. Olivia seemed momentarily uncomfortable. "Amanda is very discreet. Always has been," she explained, her tone suggesting that discreet was a euphemism for something less flattering. "She works—" "What was it again, Amanda? Something with computers, right?" "Something like that," I replied, choosing not to elaborate. This was her night, after all. Around me, I heard fragments of conversations. Olivia's colleagues talking about her meteoric rise in the company, friends commenting on the imminent wedding. Nathan walked away to get drinks, leaving us momentarily alone. "Are you okay?" Olivia asked, her tone not conveying real concern. "You look tired." "I'm great. Congratulations on the promotion. You must be proud." "I am. You know, not everyone has opportunities falling from the sky. Some of us really need to prove our worth." She paused, looking me up and down. "You could have tried a little harder, you know. It's a special occasion." Before I could respond, she continued. "Nathan and I are planning the perfect wedding. It will be at the Haywood Estate. Have you heard of it? One of the most exclusive venues in Massachusetts. 3 days of celebration, 200 guests. Mom and Dad are so proud. They always said I deserve the best." "Sounds wonderful," I replied, taking a sip of the champagne a waiter had offered me. "Of course, it's costing a fortune. Nathan is contributing, obviously, and Mom and Dad are doing what they can, but—" She hesitated, her gaze becoming calculating. "You know, I thought you might want to participate, as a sister, to make up for all these years away." So that was it. The invitation, the sudden need for family reconnection. It all had a purpose. Money. "How much are you thinking?" I asked directly. Her expression faltered for a moment, surprised by my frankness. She quickly composed herself. "Well," I thought, "something around 50,000 to help with the catering and flowers, a modest contribution, considering you've never had to help the family before." $50,000. A modest contribution. For someone who didn't even know what I did for a living. "I'll think about it," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Great." Her smile returned, as bright as the lights in the hall. "Now come." I want to introduce you to some people. They can hardly believe I have an older sister." The following hours were an exercise in patience. I was introduced as my sister Amanda, without any other context or detail about my life. For those people, I was just an appendage in Olivia's story. During dinner, I sat at the family table, listening to stories about Olivia's brilliance, about how she had always been special, about how her wedding would be the event of the year. Nobody asked me anything. It was as if I were invisible. Then came the moment for the toast. Olivia, already slightly intoxicated by champagne, stood up, glass in hand. "Thank you all for being here. This is a moment I've earned through hard work and dedication," she began, her gaze sweeping the room. "I especially want to thank my parents, who have always believed in me and supported me in everything." She turned to me, a smile on her lips that didn't match the gleam in her eyes. "And to my sister, Amanda, who managed to take time from her busy schedule to be here today. Not all of us are as lucky as Amanda, who never really had to fight for anything in life." I felt the blood freeze in my veins. "Some of us," she continued, "need to prove our worth day after day. Some of us can't simply disappear for years and expect the family to still be here when we decide to come back. But here we are, always welcoming, always willing to forgive." There was an uncomfortable silence. Even those who didn't know me could sense the barely disguised hostility in her words. "And speaking of forgiveness," Olivia continued, "I think now is a good time to announce that Amanda has generously offered to contribute to our wedding." I felt all eyes turn to me, including those of my parents, whose faces lit up with sudden interest. "Actually," I began, keeping my voice calm, "I said I would think about it." Olivia laughed, as if I had told a joke. "Oh, always so practical, my sister, always calculating everything down to the smallest detail." She turned to the audience. "You know, Amanda has always been the straight-laced one, the one who never had fun. So conservative, so predictable. It's a shame she never found anyone. But I guess some people just weren't made for love." The words hit me like a punch. Even after all these years, she still knew exactly where to attack, even without knowing anything about my current life. "That's a rather limited view of happiness, Olivia," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. She ignored my comment and continued. "But I'm glad she's finally wanting to reconnect with the family. Better late than never, right?" She raised her glass. "To family, and to my promotion, of course." As the guests applauded, I felt a presence beside me. It was James. My loyal assistant had arrived, punctual as always, to pick me up as arranged, a strategic exit in case the night became unbearable. "Everything okay, boss?" he asked discreetly. Before I could answer, Olivia noticed his presence. "And who is this?" she asked, her tone suggesting that I had finally brought a date. "This is James," I responded simply. James smiled politely and extended his hand to Olivia. "James Howell, executive assistant to Ms. Bennett." "Assistant?" Olivia looked confused. "You have an assistant? What for?" It was at that moment that Nathan, who was talking to another group, approached. He looked at James, then at me, and something in his face changed. Recognition. "Wait. Are you Amanda Bennett, from Bennett Innovations?" he asked, his voice heavy with surprise. A silence fell over our small circle. I saw Olivia's face contort in confusion. "Yes," I answered simply. "My God," Nathan continued, now visibly impressed. "You were on the cover of Forbes last month. The silent visionary, they called you. Your company is revolutionizing renewable energy technology." Olivia looked from Nathan to me, her face a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What are you talking about?" James, always attentive to the atmosphere, intervened with the subtlety of a scalpel. "Ms. Bennett is the CEO and founder of Bennett Innovations, one of the fastest-growing clean technology companies in the country." He paused calculatedly, before adding, "The current market value is around $320 million. The champagne glass almost slipped from Olivia's hands. My parents, who had approached to listen to the conversation, stood motionless, eyes wide in shock. That can't be true," Olivia stammered. "You work with computers at some small company." "I never said that," I replied calmly. "You assumed. All of you assumed." "Why did you never tell us?" my mother finally managed to ask. I looked at her, at all of them, and felt years of accumulated hurt bubbling to the surface. "I did tell you. In the early years, I tried to share every achievement, every milestone. No one was interested. After a while, I stopped trying. But 3 months ago, when I asked for that loan for the new car," my father began, forcing a paternal smile that never worked on me, "you said you couldn't afford it." "I said I wasn't interested," I corrected. "There's a difference." Nathan now looked at me with new eyes, no longer as his fiancée's older sister, but as someone whose name he had probably seen on lists of most influential people. "Well," Olivia tried to regain her composure, "this is surprising, but it explains why you never needed our help. Some people are just luckier than others." Something inside me broke. 15 years of tireless work reduced to luck. "It wasn't luck, Olivia," I replied, my voice firmer. "It was work. It was waking up at 5 in the morning and going to sleep at midnight. It was mortgaging my apartment to get seed capital. It was having my projects rejected 63 times before the first yes. It was learning to trust myself when no one else did." The silence that followed was dense, palpable. James discreetly checked his watch. "Ms. Bennett, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have that video conference with Tokyo in 40 minutes. It was our rehearsed cue, our escape route, but suddenly I realized I didn't want to escape. Not anymore." "Thank you, James. Can we postpone it by half an hour?" I turned to my family. "I have a few more things to say." My family exchanged nervous glances. Olivia seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "So, about that contribution to the wedding," she began cautiously, her tone now completely different. "The answer is no," I said firmly. "I will not contribute to your wedding, Olivia." Her eyes widened. "But why? You obviously can afford it, and we're family." "Family." I repeated the word, savoring its irony. You repeat that word as if it meant something, as if it were a magic amulet that erases years of indifference and contempt. But family is more than a title. It's care, it's support, it's presence. I took a deep breath. "Olivia, for years you've belittled my achievements, disparaged my efforts. Today, before knowing who I really was, you called me a loser, a loner, someone no normal man would want." "I was joking," she protested, casting desperate glances at our parents, seeking support. "It was just a joke between sisters." "No, it was cruelty, as it always has been." I picked up my purse, ready to leave. "Congratulations on your promotion. I hope it's everything you wish for." I turned to leave, but Olivia grabbed my arm. "Wait, you can't just walk away like this. What about the plans? The wedding is already all organized. Deposits have been paid." Gently, I removed her hand from my arm. "This is your moment of growth, Olivia. Learn to live within your means. Or ask Nathan. I'm sure he's much more impressed with me now than with you." I saw the shock in her eyes, the realization that, for the first time, I was refusing to back down, refusing to be the invisible sister. I didn't need to yell. "I had success," I said calmly. Then, looking at my parents, "That's how I discovered I wasn't weak. I was just waiting for the right time." With that, James and I left the hall, leaving behind a family in shock and a sister whose world had just turned upside down. In the car, on the way home, James finally broke the silence. "Are you okay?" I reflected for a moment. "Surprisingly, yes. Better than I've been in years." "They'll try to get in touch," he warned. "I know. What will you do when that happens?" I looked out the window, observing the lights of the city I now called home. The city where I built my life, my legacy, away from the shadow of a family that never really saw me. "I'll do what I've always done," I replied. "Move forward. But this time, with the certainty that I'm worth much more than they ever imagined." As James predicted, the contact attempts began the very next morning. First came Olivia's message. "Amanda, we need to talk about last night. It was all a misunderstanding. Call me as soon as you can." Then, a call from my mother, who left a message. On the answering machine, "Darling, we're so proud of you. Why did you never tell us about your company? We'd love to visit you. Call when you can." And finally, a surprisingly direct message from my father. "Amanda, we need to discuss some investment opportunities. I have some ideas I'd like to share. We also need to review Olivia's wedding budget. She's very upset after yesterday." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I spent Sunday immersed in quarterly reports and preparations for Monday's board meeting. It was easier that way. Numbers don't lie, don't manipulate, don't feign sudden interest when they discover you're worth millions. On Monday, upon arriving at the office, James handed me a detailed report of the contacts received over the weekend. 17 calls from Olivia, 9 from my mother, 5 from my father, and, surprisingly, 2 from Nathan. "Nathan called?" I asked, genuinely intrigued. "Yes," James replied with a slight smile. "Apparently, he would like to discuss possible business synergies." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "So that's the current term for trying to exploit family connections?" "Apparently." He also mentioned that he has always admired independent entrepreneurs and that family is the most important thing. I rolled my eyes. Amazing how my value to the family has increased exponentially in direct proportion to the size of my bank account. "Do you want me to continue filtering the calls?" "Please, I'm not ready to deal with this right now." In truth, I wasn't sure if I ever would be. Part of me wanted to completely cut ties, a clean, definitive cut. Another part, that 7-year-old girl who still desperately wanted her parents' approval, hesitated. Days turned into weeks. The contact attempts continued, although with decreasing frequency. I began receiving messages from family friends I hadn't seen in years, all suddenly interested in my life and well-being. Distant relatives found my professional email. A second-degree aunt even sent a long letter detailing her son's struggle with a rare disease, with subtle suggestions about how my blessed success could help. James, always efficient, continued to filter everything. Occasionally, he would present me with a summary, asking if I would like to respond to any specific contact. The answer was always no. But then, exactly 4 weeks after the incident at the party, something changed. "You need to see this," James said, entering my office with a worried expression. He placed his tablet in front of me. On the screen, an email from Olivia with the subject, "Urgent, Bennett Innovations Intellectual Property." I opened the email, feeling a twinge of apprehension. "Amanda, it is regrettable that you have chosen to ignore your family when we genuinely try to reconcile. However, more urgent matters require your immediate attention. During a recent conversation with Derek Mason, remember him? My ex-boyfriend from college who now works at the patent department, I casually mentioned your work with high-efficiency solar panels. Derek was extremely interested and informed me that there are potential intellectual property issues you should be aware of. As your sister, I feel obligated to alert you that your technology may be infringing on existing patents. Fortunately, Derek is willing to examine your projects before this becomes a serious legal problem. I am also concerned about your well-being. Isolation and excessive focus on work can be signs of underlying psychological problems. Mom and Dad are devastated by your recent behavior and suggested that perhaps it's time for a family intervention. Despite everything, we remain family. I am willing to consider your behavior at the party as an isolated episode, possibly caused by stress. If you finally decide to act like an adult, responsible sister, there is still time to participate in the wedding, not only financially, but as a bridesmaid. It would be a beautiful gesture of reconciliation. I await your urgent response. On the intellectual property issue, Derek needs an answer by Friday. With love, Olivia, I felt a combination of anger and disbelief taking hold of me. The audacity, the transparent attempt at manipulation, it was almost admirable in its boldness. She really thinks I'll fall for this? I asked, passing the tablet back to James. Apparently. What do you want me to respond? I thought for a moment. Nothing yet. I want to check some things first. In the following hours, I contacted our legal team. Our patents were solid, our intellectual property properly protected. There was absolutely no reason for concern. I also did a quick search on Derek Mason. He did indeed work at the patent department as a junior administrative assistant, without any legal training or capacity to evaluate intellectual property issues. While investigating, another email arrived, this time from my father. Amanda, your mother and I are very concerned. Olivia told us about the potential problems with your company. Why did you never ask for our advice? We could always have helped. Speaking of help, I am considering making some investments and would like to discuss the possibility of a loan. Nothing exorbitant, just enough for some promising opportunities that have arisen. We are also thinking of selling the house for a more comfortable retirement, but the real estate market is not favorable at the moment. Perhaps you could buy the property for a fair value. It would make a great vacation home for you. As for Olivia's wedding, she is really devastated by your refusal. As a father, it pains me to see my daughters in disharmony. Think about what your mother and I have done for you over the years. It's time to give back a little, don't you think? With love, Dad. What my parents did for me over the years, I muttered to myself, feeling a mixture of sadness and incredulity. Apparently, ignoring me for decades now counts as parental sacrifice. That night, sitting alone in my apartment overlooking the harbor, I made a decision. Olivia's manipulation attempt had crossed a line. It wasn't just about money now. She was actively trying to sabotage my professional reputation. The next morning, I convened a meeting with our legal and public relations teams. I want everything documented, I instructed. Every email, every voicemail, every contact attempt. We won't respond directly yet, but I want to be prepared in case this escalates. Do you think your sister might really try something against the company? Asked Sarah, our legal director. I hope not, but I prefer to be prepared. Meanwhile, I instructed James to initiate a confidential background check process. If my family was willing to play dirty, I needed to know exactly what I was facing. The results arrived a week later, and they were revealing. Olivia wasn't exactly the successful professional she claimed to be. Her promotion to marketing director came after a reorganization that had significantly reduced the scope and authority of the position. Her salary, while respectable, certainly didn't accommodate the lifestyle she and Nathan were planning. Nathan, in turn, had a complicated financial history. 3 failed businesses in 5 years, substantial debts. A pattern of relationships with financially stable women followed by contentious separations. As for my parents, I discovered that their financial situation was much worse than I had imagined. Multiple mortgages on the family home, credit cards, maxed out, substantial personal loans. They're desperate, I concluded, looking at the documents spread over my desk. It's not about family, it's about financial survival. James, who had supervised the investigation, nodded gravely. The wedding date is approaching. Vendors will start demanding final payments soon. And they expected me to be the golden goose. I completed. The perfect plan, except for one detail. I didn't cooperate. It was at this moment that the most concerning information arrived. One of the investigators had discovered that Olivia was actively spreading rumors in the industry about problems at Bennett Innovations. casual conversations with technology journalists, insinuations at industry events. Nothing explicit. Nothing that could be easily traced back to her. But the pattern was there. She's trying to harm our Series C funding negotiations, I realized, feeling a wave of icy fury. If our investors hear rumors about intellectual property problems, it could delay the closing for months, James completed. Long enough to cause cash flow problems. Long enough for me to get desperate and turn to family, I added. Very clever, Olivia. But she had made a critical mistake. She underestimated me. Again. In the following days, I implemented a discreet containment plan. One-on-one meetings with each of our key investors, offering full transparency about our intellectual property. Strategic lunches with influential journalists in the technology sector. A complete and early review of our patents with the country's top IP attorneys. In each conversation, without ever mentioning Olivia or the family situation, I made it clear that we were aware of unfounded attempts to undermine our credibility, and that we had complete documentation of the origin of these false allegations. In parallel, I asked our legal team to prepare a formal letter detailing exactly how Olivia's actions constituted defamation and interference in business relations. The letter would not be sent yet, but would be ready if necessary. 3. Weeks passed, and the contacts from my family became increasingly desperate. Amanda, we need to resolve this like adults. The wedding is in 5 weeks and the vendors are threatening to cancel. Olivia. Daughter, we are worried about you. This behavior is not healthy. We need to discuss your future in the family. Mother. Critical. Situation with mortgage. Need urgent response on loan proposal. Father. And then, when I ignored all of this, came Olivia's final threat. Amanda, your obstinacy leaves no alternatives. If we don't receive a response by Friday, I will have to take measures I would rather avoid. I have contacts in the technology press who would be very interested in a story about the silent visionary and her contempt for her own family. Imagine the headlines. Tech CEO refuses to help sister while amassing millions. Or perhaps, the dark side of success, how Amanda Bennett turned her back on her roots. Furthermore, the photos of your nervous breakdown during college were never published, but they still exist. Remember that incident in the chemistry lab? It wouldn't be a good image for your investors, I'm sure. This is your last chance to act like family. $50,000 for the wedding expenses, a reasonable loan for Dad, and your presence as a bridesmaid. It's not asking much considering your financial situation. You have 48 hours. Olivia. I read the email 3 times, each time feeling less anger and more pity. Pity for someone whose idea of family was so fundamentally distorted. Pity for a woman who confused love with transactions. Pity for a sister I never really knew, and who clearly never knew me. What did she mean by nervous breakdown? Asked James, who was reading over my shoulder. In my sophomore year of college, I had an exhaustion crisis after 72 hours without sleep, preparing a crucial project. I fainted in the lab. Nothing dramatic, just the result of extreme stress and poor nutrition. But my parents transformed this into a narrative of emotional fragility that they pursued for years. And now Olivia is threatening to use this against you. Yes, she really believes this could harm my professional reputation. What are you going to do? I stood up, looking out the window at the distant ocean. The answer came with surprising clarity. I'm going to say yes. James looked at me perplexed. Yes? After all this? Yes to the meeting she so desperately wants. Let's give Olivia, Nathan, and my parents exactly what they asked for. A chance to discuss all of this face to face. Are you sure? I nodded, feeling a strange calm. Absolutely. It's time to end this, once and for all. That night, I sent a short email to Olivia. I agree to meet. Thursday, 2 p.m., main conference room at Bennett Innovations. Bring Nathan and our parents. We will discuss all pending matters. Amanda, her response came minutes later, overflowing with poorly disguised triumph. Finally saw reason. We will be there. I knew deep down you still cared about family. Can't wait to resolve all of this and move forward as a united family. As I read her words, I felt not anger, not resentment, but a deep sense of finality. At the next meeting, I would no longer be the invisible sister, the neglected daughter. I would be Amanda Bennett, CEO, a woman who built her own empire and who would finally establish her own terms. Family is a social construct, I commented to James as I turned off the computer. Some ties need to be broken for us to grow, and some need to be cut completely, he added with a small smile of understanding. Exactly. That's what I'll do on Thursday. Thursday arrived with a clear sky and bright sunshine, an ironic contrast to the storm I knew I was about to unleash. I arrived at the office especially early, reviewing all the documentation I had prepared in the last few days. Everything ready for the meeting? Asked James, entering my office with 2 cups of coffee. Yes. Is the conference room prepared? Exactly as requested. Legal team on standby in the adjacent room. Security informed. Complete documentation in the folders. And, he smiled, placing a cup on my desk, extra strong coffee for you. What would I do without you, James? I asked, genuinely grateful. Probably hire someone equally competent, but not as charming, he replied with a wink. At 1:55 p.m., James informed me that my family had arrived. They were being led to the main conference room, an imposing space with a panoramic view of the Boston skyline, discreetly and elegantly decorated. How do they look? I asked. Anxious. Your sister is especially well-dressed, Prada from the latest collection. Your parents are nervous, constantly checking the environment. Nathan is evaluating everything as if calculating values. Predictable, I commented. Let's make them wait 5 more minutes. At 2:05 p.m., I entered the conference room. The silence was immediate. My parents, Olivia and Nathan, were sitting on one side of the long mahogany table. 4 sealed folders were arranged on the opposite side, one for each of them. Good afternoon, everyone, I said calmly, taking my place at the head of the table. James sat discreetly at a small desk in the corner, laptop open, ready to document everything. Amanda! My mother was the first to speak, rising for a hug that I politely avoided with a subtle gesture. What a wonderful place you have here. We are so proud. Thank you, I replied without emotion, indicating that she should sit down again. Let's get straight to the point. You requested this meeting to discuss financial issues related to Olivia's wedding and possible loans for my father, correct? There was an uncomfortable exchange of glances between them. Well, it's not just that, my father began, forcing a paternal smile that never worked on me. We also want to reconnect. We're family after all. I understand, I replied. So it's a happy coincidence that this desire to reconnect arose exactly when you discovered my financial position. Don't be cynical, dear, my mother intervened. We've always cared. It's just that you were always so independent. So distant, added Olivia, her tone a study in false concern, always keeping secrets from us. How could we support you if you never shared anything? I took a deep breath, maintaining a neutral expression. Let's clarify a few points before proceeding. First, I would like each of you to open the folder in front of you. Please don't share the contents with each other yet. Confused, they obeyed. I watched their expressions change in real time. Confusion, shock, and finally, for Olivia and Nathan, something close to panic. My mother's folder contained a chronological compilation of every significant moment in my life that she had missed or ignored. Graduations, awards, company milestones, each documented with date, time, and a brief description of how I had tried to share the news, followed by the response, or lack thereof, I received. My father's folder was a detailed financial report of his own situation, hidden debts, failed investment attempts, the complete history of loan requests that were never repaid, not just to me, but to other relatives and friends. Nathan's folder contained his complete history: failed businesses, lawsuits for fraud, previous relationships with wealthy women that ended in suspicious circumstances, and his current precarious financial situation. Olivia's folder, perhaps the most incriminating, contained screenshots of each defamatory email, records of her conversations with journalists about problems at Bennett Innovations, and, most devastating, evidence that she had tried to illegally access confidential company documents through a former employee she had contacted. What is this? Olivia was the first to recover her voice, her face pale. Documentation, I replied simply. Facts, evidence. This is an invasion of privacy, exclaimed my father, abruptly closing his folder. Actually, James intervened from his corner, all this information was legally obtained through public sources. No law was broken in the process of compilation. Nathan was silent, his eyes fixed on the open folder in front of him. Why are you doing this? My mother asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes. We're your family. Exactly for that reason, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Because you are my family, and family should mean honesty. So let's be honest, finally. I pulled out my own folder and opened it. In recent months, you have tried to manipulate me, blackmail me, and potentially sabotage my company, all in the name of family. Olivia, you went further, actively trying to harm my professional reputation because I refused to finance your excessively luxurious wedding. I never, she began, but I interrupted her. Please don't insult my intelligence with denials. It's all documented. Every email, every casual conversation with journalists, every attempt to access confidential documents. The question now is, what do we do from here? A tense silence took over the room. Nathan was the first to speak, surprisingly direct. What is your proposal? Olivia looked at him, horrified. Nathan! What? He replied, irritated. She obviously has everything documented. Let's hear what she has to say. I nodded, almost grateful for his pragmatic approach. My proposal is simple. You sign the documents on the last page of your folders and we go our separate ways. No contact. No future claims. No trying to use the Bennett name for personal or professional benefit. You're disowning us? My mother exclaimed dramatically. You can't disown someone from something that was never theirs to begin with, I replied. I'm simply formalizing what already exists in practice. We don't have a meaningful family relationship. And if we refuse to sign? Challenged Olivia, her tone regaining some of its old arrogance. Then the folder identical to this one, I pointed to hers, will be delivered to your employers, the press, and the appropriate authorities when relevant. In your specific case, Olivia, attempted corporate espionage is a serious crime. Her face paled again. You wouldn't do that. I really would prefer not to, I admitted. But you've given me every reason to believe that you'll do anything to get what you want. I'm simply protecting myself. My father quickly flipped to the last page of his folder. It's a confidentiality agreement and a waiver of any future claim? Yes. By signing, you agree to never publicly discuss my personal or professional life, never try to take advantage of my position, and never contact me or anyone associated with Bennett Innovations again. This is unnecessarily cruel, my mother sobbed. We're your parents. Parents who were never present, I replied, feeling a twinge of sadness that I quickly suppressed. Parents who only became interested when they discovered I had something. You wanted. Nathan, surprisingly, picked up a pen. How much? Excuse me? How much are you offering for us to sign this? He clarified, ignoring Olivia's shocked look. Nothing. He laughed, incredulous. You expect us to sign without receiving anything in return? You receive the assurance that I won't expose your actions or seek legal compensation for the damages attempted against my company, I explained. Considering the circumstances, it's a generous offer. Olivia was furious now. So that's it? You call us here just to humiliate us and then discard us like trash? What kind of person does this to their own family? The kind of person who learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by actions, I replied calmly. The kind of person who spent years trying to be seen, heard, and valued, only to be treated as invisible until I had something you wanted. My parents exchanged anguished looks. What about the wedding? My mother finally asked, her voice small. Olivia's wedding is not my responsibility. It never was. A heavy silence fell over the room. I could almost see the gears turning in their minds, calculating options, weighing consequences. It was Nathan who spoke first, turning to Olivia. We need to sign. What? No, she protested. Olivia, he said firmly, you tried to access confidential documents of a technology company. That's a federal crime. I was just trying to protect the family. She was abandoning us while amassing millions. She built something from scratch, Nathan replied, surprisingly lucid, while you expected to have everything handed to you. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine confusion on Olivia's face. Her fiancé, who I had assumed was with her only out of interest, was now taking my side. Her world was crumbling before her eyes. Nathan, sign the paper, Olivia, he said, already signing his own. It's over. One by one, they signed. First Nathan, then my father, reluctantly my mother, and finally, after a long moment of internal resistance, Olivia. James rose, silently to collect the documents, checking each signature before nodding in my direction. Now, I said, closing my folder. Our part of the agreement. Inside each folder, there is a sealed envelope. You can open it after leaving the building. They looked at me with expressions ranging from anger to curiosity. What's inside? Asked my father. The final conclusion of this chapter, I replied simply. James will escort you to the exit now. Is that it? Is there nothing else to say? My mother asked, tears streaming down her face. I considered the question for a moment. There were so many things I could say. Years of unexpressed hurts, lost moments, wasted opportunities. But in the end, only one thing mattered. That's how I discovered I wasn't weak, I said softly. I was just waiting for the right time to establish healthy boundaries. With that, I stood up and left the room, leaving James to conduct the final procedures. As I walked down the hallway to my office, I felt a weight being lifted. Not completely, never completely, but enough to breathe more freely than I had done in years. From my office, I watched through the security cameras as they left the building. Outside, each opened their envelope. Inside each envelope, I had placed a check. Not the $50,000 that Olivia demanded, not the loans my father wanted, but amounts precisely calculated for what each of them genuinely needed to move forward without me. For my parents, enough to pay off the main mortgage on the house and establish a modest retirement fund, conditioned on mandatory financial counseling. For Olivia, enough for an adequate but not extravagant wedding, deposited directly into the vendor's accounts, not into her hands. For Nathan, nothing. Just a card with the words, "Choose better next time." Olivia's face reflected pure confusion when she saw her check. My parents seemed relieved, but disoriented. Nathan read the card and surprisingly laughed. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was liberation for all of us. They were free from the weight of pretending to care about a daughter they never really knew. I was free from the pursuit of approval that would never come. I turned off the monitor and returned my attention to the work I loved, to the company I built, to the life I chose. 3 months later, I received a wedding invitation. Not from Olivia, our paths would never cross again, but from James. My loyal executive assistant was marrying his longtime partner, and he invited me not just as his boss, but as his friend. On the wedding day, as I watched two men who genuinely loved each other exchanging vows, I reflected on the journey that brought me here. About how losing a family allowed me to find another, chosen not by blood, but by mutual respect, admiration, and genuine care. During the reception, James found me alone for a moment. "Any regrets?" he asked, knowing exactly what was on my mind. "About my family?" "No," I replied honestly. "Just sadness for what could have been. What about you? Any regrets about bringing me to your big day? I'm notoriously bad at parties." He smiled. "None. Your family, Amanda. The real one." The words touched something deep inside me. A recognition that family isn't who shares your DNA, but who shares your journey. That night, returning home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Rachel, my therapist from the difficult times when I was building the company. "I'm ready to discuss the next chapter," I said when she answered. "What chapter would that be?" she asked, familiar with my tendency to frame life in terms of narrative. The chapter where balance isn't just a business goal, but a personal goal too. The chapter where success isn't measured just by market value, but by genuine connections. "Sounds like a good chapter," she commented. "I can't wait to see how it develops." As I hung up, I looked again at the city I now called home. The twinkling lights against the night sky, each representing ongoing stories, lives being lived, connections being formed and broken and reformed. Some people spend their entire lives seeking approval from people who will never be able to provide it. I had wasted too much time in that pursuit. But I had also found my strength in the process. The strength to set boundaries, to value my own story, to create my own empire. And perhaps the greatest act of strength wasn't building a financial empire, but recognizing that value doesn't come from how much money you have, but from how much you respect yourself. I didn't need to yell, I murmured to myself, watching the Boston skyline. I had evidence, I had dignity, and most importantly, I had myself. The phone vibrated with a message from James, a photo of him and his husband, radiant smiles with the caption, "Thank you for being part of our chosen family." I smiled, feeling a kind of peace I had never experienced before. Perhaps this was the true success, not the millions in the bank account, not the Forbes headlines, but the ability to close toxic chapters and open new ones, full of possibilities and authentic connections. I had lost the family I was born into, but gained the ability to choose the family I deserved. In the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.